Did you feel it? That split second when your stomach dropped, before your brain caught up. The moment you saw the words and thought, no, not again. What if I told you that in today's world, it takes less than 5 seconds for fear to feel like fact? And once it does, there's no rewind button. Because just moments ago, yes, minutes, millions of people around the world were jolted by a headline so alarming, so emotionally loaded, that it froze thumbs mid-scroll and sent hearts racing. 2 minutes ago, the royal family confirms devastating news about Prince Harry, car crash accident. Read it again, not slowly, the way most people actually read it. 2 minutes ago, royal family confirms devastating Prince Harry, car crash. Your mind didn't pause to verify. It didn't ask for sources. It didn't wait for context. It reacted. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And that reaction is exactly where this story begins. Because this isn't just about Prince Harry. And it's not really about a car crash. It's about something far more unsettling. How easily panic can be manufactured. How quickly silence can be interpreted as tragedy. And how one name, just one, can turn rumor into global alarm. Let me ask you something honestly. When you first saw the headline, did you believe it? Be honest with yourself. Most people did. Not because they're gullible. Not because they're careless. But because the story pressed on something deep, emotional, and unresolved. A memory the world never quite let go of. And that's why this headline didn't just spread. It detonated. Within minutes, social media feeds flooded with shock. Reaction videos went live without scripts. Comment sections turned into vigils. Some people were already grieving something that hadn't even been confirmed. Others were furious. How could this happen again? Why doesn't the royal family protect him? History is repeating itself. Notice something? The narrative wrote itself. Before any statement. Before any verification. Before any truth. And here's the uncomfortable part. The headline didn't need to be true to feel true. That's the power of timing. The power of wording. The power of fear. Especially when attached to a man whose entire public life has been shaped by loss, danger, and relentless scrutiny. Prince Harry is not just a public figure. He's a symbol. To some, a rebel. To others, a victim. To others still, a walking reminder of unresolved trauma tied to flashing cameras and speeding vehicles. So when those 6 words, car crash accident, appeared next to his name, something primal clicked. Your brain filled in the blanks. And the internet did the rest. But let's slow this down. Because the most important part of this story is not what people thought happened. It's how fast the world decided it had. Within minutes of the headline surfacing, reposts multiplied. Accounts copied the wording exactly. Others made it more dramatic. Breaking. Confirmed. So tragic. Royal disaster. Each version slightly more emotional than the last. And here's the trick most people don't realize. The phrase 2 minutes ago doesn't describe time. It creates urgency. It tells your brain, if you don't pay attention now, you'll be behind. You'll miss something important. You'll be the last to know. That's not journalism. That's psychology. Add the phrase, royal family confirms, and suddenly the story feels official, regardless of whether a statement exists. No quote needed. No source required. The implication alone does the work. And once fear is activated, logic doesn't get a seat at the table. People didn't ask, where was the crash? They didn't ask, which palace confirmed this? They didn't ask, why is there no footage, no alert, no breaking news banner on major networks? Because emotionally, it already made sense. That's the dangerous part. Stories don't need evidence when they align with expectation. And the expectation, the unspoken one, is that Prince Harry's life is always one step away from chaos. Ask yourself this. If the same headline had named a different royal, would it have hit as hard? Probably not. Because Prince Harry's narrative has been framed, for years, as fragile. Threatened. Constantly at risk. So the internet didn't just react to the headline. It recognized a pattern it thought it already knew. And in that recognition, fear felt justified. As the minutes ticked on, something else happened. Silence. No official royal statement appeared immediately. No denial. No confirmation. Nothing. And in the digital age, silence is never neutral. Silence gets interpreted, twisted, amplified, weaponized. Some said the palace was preparing the public. Others claimed they were hiding details. A few insisted the delay proved the story was worse than reported. Do you see how quickly speculation becomes certainty? The absence of information became information itself. And while this was unfolding, reaction content exploded. Creators went live without facts. Commentators spoke in hushed tones. Some even framed their videos as memorial-style reflections, all based on a headline. No names, no timestamps, no verified statements, just momentum. And momentum online doesn't ask permission. It rolls. But here's where things get even more complicated. This headline didn't just trigger fear, it triggered memory. Because for millions of people, the words royal and car crash are not neutral. They carry history, a history that never healed properly. And that emotional residue? It's still active. So when this rumor appeared, it wasn't processed as a new event. It was processed as an echo. An echo of something the world still hasn't fully come to terms with. And that's why the reaction wasn't calm. It was visceral. People weren't just reading the news. They were reliving something. That's why this moment matters. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost happened in the collective mind. Because for a brief window of time, a false sense of tragedy felt real enough to cause genuine emotional distress. And that raises a disturbing question. If a single headline can do this, what happens next time? What happens when the rumor is more convincing? When the language is tighter? When the silence lasts longer? What happens when fear outruns truth every single time? But before we answer that, we need to rewind. Because buried beneath the chaos is a critical detail most people missed. Something subtle. Something quiet, something that didn't fit. And once you notice it, the entire story starts to look very different. Because while the internet was spiraling, there was a parallel process unfolding, slow, methodical, and almost invisible. Verification, cross-checking, timelines, official channels. And what they found didn't match the panic. Not even close. But the reason you didn't see that immediately is because calm never trends faster than fear. So here's the cliffhanger you need to sit with. If this wasn't confirmed, if the royal family didn't actually say what the headline claimed, if no verified incident occurred, then who started this? And why did so many people believe it without question? Every viral storm begins quietly, not with sirens, not with official statements, not even with certainty. It begins with a single post, one account, one sentence, one tap of publish. And that's exactly how this one started. Before the panic, before the reaction videos, before the emotional breakdowns in comment sections, there was just a post. Ordinary at first glance, almost forgettable. No profile picture that stood out. No verified badge. No reputation for breaking real news. Just words. Short, urgent, loaded. And those words landed in the exact place where fear lives. Let me ask you something. How often do you actually check who posted something before you react to what it says? Be honest. Because most people didn't. They saw the phrasing. They saw the timing. They saw the name Prince Harry. And their brains filled in the rest. The first post didn't scream. It whispered. And whispers are sometimes more dangerous, because they invite curiosity rather than skepticism. It read like someone sharing something they weren't supposed to share yet. Like leaked information. Like insider knowledge. That illusion is powerful. Because the internet has trained us to believe that the most important news doesn't come from official sources anymore. It leaks first. And whoever posted that first message understood that. Whether intentionally or accidentally, they framed the story in a way that bypassed logic and went straight for instinct. No details, no location, no timestamp beyond minutes ago, just enough to trigger alarm. And here's the part most people don't realize. The first post didn't go viral because it was shared widely at first. It went viral because it was shared by the right people. Small accounts with loyal audiences. Commentary pages that thrive on urgency. Channels built around reacting quickly, not carefully. These accounts didn't verify. They amplified. And each amplification stripped away more uncertainty and replaced it with confidence. This just came in. I'm seeing reports. Apparently confirmed. Notice the language shift? From might to is. From reports say to this happened. That shift happened in minutes. And once it did, there was no going back. Because algorithms don't care about truth. They care about engagement. And fear is engagement on steroids. The post jumped platforms. From X to TikTok. From TikTok to YouTube Shorts. from shorts to full-length live streams. Each jump added commentary, emotion, interpretation. The original message was no longer the story. The reaction to it was. And reactions have faces, voices, tears. People trust faces more than text. So when creators appeared on screen looking shocked, concerned, even shaken, viewers assumed something real had happened. Why would someone look that emotional over nothing? That's the trap. Emotion becomes evidence. Let's talk about speed. Within the first 10 minutes, the story had reached millions. Not because it was trending yet, but because people were sending it privately. Group chats, family messages. Did you see this? Is this real? Fear spreads faster in private than in public. Because when someone you trust sends you something, your guard drops. And suddenly, the rumor feels personal. That's when panic escalates. Some viewers didn't just scroll. They stopped what they were doing. Work paused. Conversations halted. Attention locked. Because this wasn't framed as entertainment. It was framed as tragedy. And tragedy demands attention. But here's where the cracks begin to appear, if you know where to look. As the story spread, something strange happened. The details never evolved. Usually, when breaking news is real, information expands. Location appears. Timeline sharpens. Names of officials emerge. But here, nothing. The wording stayed vague. The claims stayed general. No specifics filled in the gaps. And yet, belief increased. Why? Because repetition replaced evidence. When you see the same claim 10 times from 10 different accounts, your brain interprets volume as validation. Surely all these people can't be wrong. But what if they're all copying the same source? What if there is no independent confirmation? That's the illusion of consensus. And it's one of the most dangerous illusions online. Meanwhile, something else was happening behind the scenes. Journalists noticed. Not the headline. Journalists see sensational headlines all the time. What caught their attention was the absence. No police alerts. No emergency reports. No hospital leaks. No photographers. For a public figure under constant surveillance, that absence was loud. But journalists don't react publicly until they're sure. So while the internet screamed, the professionals slowed down. They checked flight records. They checked public schedules. They checked with contacts. And what they found didn't match the chaos. Nothing indicated an incident. But the internet doesn't wait for professionals. It outruns them. By the time cautious voices began raising questions, the narrative was already emotionally locked in. People weren't asking, is this true? They were asking, how bad is it? That's a crucial difference. Once a story crosses that line, correcting it becomes exponentially harder. Because now you're not just challenging information. You're challenging emotion. And emotion fights back. Some commenters attacked anyone who questioned the story. How dare you doubt this? Show some respect. People are hurting. Hurting over what? An unverified headline. But again, logic was already sidelined. Let's pause here and reflect. What does it say about our media environment when a single unconfirmed post can emotionally destabilize millions? When fear feels more credible than fact? When silence becomes proof? And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. Because once people realized there was no immediate confirmation, some creators doubled down instead of pulling back. They reframed the lack of information as evidence of a cover-up. They're controlling the narrative. They don't want panic. They're preparing an announcement. That move is strategic. It inoculates the rumor against correction. If confirmation comes, they were right. If denial comes, it's a lie. If silence continues, it's proof of secrecy. There's no losing position. And viewers, emotionally invested, followed along. This is how misinformation becomes resilient. It adapts. It doesn't collapse under scrutiny, it mutates. And the mutation that happened next was subtle but significant. The phrase car crash began to disappear. Instead, people said incident, event, situation. Why? Because vagueness protects credibility. Specifics can be disproven. Ambiguity can't. And as the language softened, belief hardened. Now ask yourself this. If you were scrolling at that moment, would you have stopped to question it? Or would you have felt that familiar pit in your stomach and kept watching, reading, consuming? Because the story wasn't just about Prince Harry anymore. It was about you, your attention, your fear, your emotional investment. And that's when the first real consequences began to surface. People experienced genuine anxiety. Some relived old trauma. Others expressed anger, grief, confusion, all triggered by something that hadn't been proven. That's not harmless. That's impact. And it raises a responsibility question no one likes to answer. Who's accountable when a rumor hurts people? The original poster? The amplifiers? The platforms? Or the audience? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Without engagement, the rumor would have died quietly. But engagement kept it alive. Every share, every comment, every reaction, including the ones expressing disbelief. Outrage still boosts visibility. By the time doubts reached the surface, the story had already peaked. And peaks are hard to undo. But then, quietly, something shifted. A few credible voices began speaking up. Not loudly, not dramatically, carefully. They didn't dismiss the fear. They didn't mock the believers. They simply asked questions. Where is the confirmation? Who issued it? Why hasn't any major outlet reported this? And those questions started spreading. Slowly at first, then faster. The panic didn't vanish, but it wavered. And in that moment of wavering, the entire narrative stood on the edge. Because if this was false, then everything that followed needed re-examination. Motives, mechanisms, manipulation. And that leads us to the most important pivot in this story. The moment when rumor met reality. The moment when silence stopped being ambiguous and started becoming informative. Because what came next didn't arrive as a dramatic announcement. It arrived as something far more powerful. Absence of evidence. And that absence began to speak volumes. But the internet doesn't like quiet truths. It prefers loud lies. So the question became, would truth catch up before damage became permanent? Or had the first post already done something irreversible? And once you see that mechanism clearly, you'll start recognizing it everywhere. But before we get there, we need to talk about the word that changed everything. The word confirmed. The most dangerous word online is confirmed. It's short. It's definitive. It's the verbal equivalent of a flashing red light. One word, and suddenly your brain stops asking questions. It doesn't matter if there's evidence, if there's a source, or if anyone actually said it. Confirmed bypasses skepticism. It overrides caution. It converts rumor into perceived fact in milliseconds. And that's exactly what happened here. Think about it. When you see a news alert with the word confirmed, what's the first thing you do? Most people react emotionally before cognitively. You feel urgency, shock, even panic, sometimes all at once. Your brain says, something has happened. Pay attention now, before it asks, is this actually true? This is why journalists and media analysts warn about the misuse of confirmed. Because once the word is attached, a story begins to feel inevitable. People start assuming it's been independently verified. They don't pause to consider, who confirmed it? How did they confirm it? What are the sources? All of those questions get bypassed because the word itself carries authority. And in this case, that authority was borrowed, implied, and completely unverified. The initial posts didn't come from verified accounts. They didn't come from the royal family's official channels. They didn't come from traditional media outlets. Yet the phrasing suggested legitimacy. Confirmed, paired with the name Prince Harry, gave people enough cues to suspend disbelief. There's a psychology behind this. Cognitive scientists call it the illusory truth effect. Repetition combined with authoritative language increases the likelihood of belief, even if the statement is false. That's why multiple posts, multiple shares, multiple videos, all stating the same thing, amplify the perception of truth. And that's exactly what happened here. Once the word confirmed is out there, every viewer becomes a potential vector. They share it with friends, they post reactions, they comment, and tag others. Every action reinforces the story in their mind. Emotion overpowers fact. Fear overrides logic. And by the time anyone tries to check the sources, it's too late. The narrative is already entrenched. But the danger of this word isn't just in belief. It's in behavior. People start acting as if the event has already occurred. They post prayers, send urgent messages to loved ones, speculate on consequences, and even experience real physiological stress. Heart rate increases, cortisol spikes, panic. Entire communities feel the emotional impact of something that, at that moment, hasn't happened. And that's where misinformation transcends just a rumor and enters the realm of real-world effect. Emotional reactions manifest physically and socially. They influence conversations, decisions, and even mental health. The first post that started the panic didn't contain a single fact, yet it triggered a cascade of genuine consequences. And that's where misinformation transcends just a rumor and enters the realm of real-world effect. Emotional reactions manifest physically and socially. They influence conversations, decisions, and even mental health. The first post that started the panic didn't contain a single fact, yet it triggered a cascade of genuine consequences. Meanwhile, on the other side of the internet, fact-checkers were already mobilizing. They reached out to palace contacts, checked schedules, verified flight records, and scanned emergency service reports. Within the first 30 minutes, the absence of any confirming evidence became clear. There was no car crash. There was no confirmed incident. The royal family had not released any statement. Nothing in the public record supported the claim. But here's the paradox. The longer the story circulated unchecked, the more entrenched it became. Even after fact checks emerged, people resisted correction. Cognitive bias kicks in. Once the brain has anchored a dramatic event, evidence contradicting it doesn't fully erase the emotional imprint. They fear memory remains, even if the factual basis is removed. Now, think about the role of influencers and content creators. Many jumped on the story without verification, driven by clicks, engagement, or the pressure to react first. Live streams were launched, reaction videos were uploaded, commentary channels dissected every imagined angle. Each piece of content added emotional weight, creating layers of perceived reality that didn't exist. The story became self-sustaining. Fear fueled clicks, and clicks fueled visibility. And the audience? They didn't just watch. They participated. Each comment, share, or reaction reinforced the illusion. Social validation confirmed the story, independent of any factual source. You can see why confirmed is a weapon in this environment. It's a single word that mobilizes networks of emotional reinforcement faster than any fact-checking process can respond. At the same time, traditional media observed quietly. Unlike social media creators, they couldn't publish without verification. So for a short period, a vacuum existed. The online rumor dominated the conversation while legitimate sources paused. Silence, again, played a role. People interpreted the lack of immediate official response as tacit confirmation. After all, if it weren't true, wouldn't the royal family speak up immediately? Silence can be deceptive. It allows the rumor to become more compelling precisely because nobody contradicts it. And when coupled with a word like confirmed, it becomes almost impossible for the casual observer to disentangle truth from perception. Let's also consider the emotional landscape. Why did this rumor feel so plausible? Why did it resonate so deeply? Prince Harry's public narrative is colored by trauma, vulnerability, and past tragedies. The world has witnessed events involving him that were dangerous or emotionally charged. That history primes the audience's imagination. They already know danger is possible, and they've already felt worry. When a new alarming headline appears, it fits seamlessly into the existing mental framework. That's why emotion overtakes fact. When the brain has a pattern it recognizes, even a false story can feel inevitable. And the word confirmed triggers the final seal of perceived authenticity. But the unfolding didn't stop there. The rumor began to evolve. As panic escalated, content creators adjusted their language. Car crash sometimes became incident or situation, making the story slightly more ambiguous, less verifiable, but emotionally charged all the same. Ambiguity protects a narrative. It allows it to survive scrutiny while still delivering emotional impact. Viewers continued to respond. Some posted heartfelt messages of support. Others expressed outrage at the imagined negligence. A few even began to speculate wildly about causes or consequences. The rumor had taken on a life of its own, independent of any actual event. And this is where it gets fascinating. The story spread is not linear. It doesn't travel in a straight line from post to viewer. It loops, accelerates, and feeds on itself. Reaction videos reference posts, commentary channels reference reactions, and social media algorithms push content further. Feedback loops accelerate belief. Emotion amplifies reach. And the original confirmed post becomes almost irrelevant. It's the narrative engine that matters. At this point, fact-checkers faced an uphill battle. They can publish articles, issue statements, and reach out to sources. But the emotional imprint of the rumor was already seated. Once fear takes root, it's not easily displaced by logic. Even when corrections appear, cognitive bias often preserves the original impression. The audience remembers the panic first and the correction second. By now, the rumor had become more than a story about Prince Harry. It became a case study in how perception can outpace reality. How a single word, confirmed, combined with timing, emotional resonance, and social reinforcement, can create an almost irreversible chain of belief. And here's the most critical insight. This isn't unique to one headline or one public figure. It's a structural feature of modern digital media. Fear travels faster than truth. Emotion outruns evidence. Silence can be interpreted as proof. And a single, strategically placed word can ignite it all. But here's the cliffhanger you need to sit with. If this mechanism can happen to Prince Harry, a high-profile royal constantly in the public eye, then how easily could it happen to anyone else? Or with any story? And what are the long-term consequences when the emotional impact of false information outweighs reality itself? Think about that for a second. Silence, which is the absence of information, suddenly became louder than any statement could have been. Every delayed tweet, every unanswered press inquiry, every moment without an official comment was immediately filled with speculation. And in the digital age, speculation spreads faster than fact. The first whispers were cautious. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. Then the whispers turned into rumors. It must be bad if the palace hasn't said anything. And soon, they became conviction. They're hiding something. This is serious. What's fascinating here is the psychology behind why silence is so effective. When the brain doesn't have information, it tries to fill in the blanks. Humans hate uncertainty. We crave narrative. When official channels remain quiet, the imagination becomes the loudest voice in the room. And in this case, that voice was terrifying. Social media channels exploded. Commentary videos, live reactions, and speculative threads emerged simultaneously. Some creators framed the silence as a calculated move by the palace. They're controlling the narrative, one popular commentator said. They don't want panic spreading too fast. Others claimed the delay was proof of the severity of the event. If it were minor, they'd announce it immediately, argued another. Notice a pattern? Regardless of the interpretation, silence became a tool. It reinforced the emotional stakes. It made people lean further into belief. And it made the story almost untouchable. Once emotion anchors a narrative, no simple statement can immediately dislodge it. Meanwhile, fact-checkers quietly dug into timelines, statements, and logistical details. They examined travel records, communications logs, and public schedules. Within minutes, they realized something crucial. There was no official confirmation, no emergency reports, no witnesses or evidence of any crash. The royal family had made no statement. Because, in reality, no incident had occurred. But the absence of evidence doesn't travel as quickly as fear. Algorithms amplify reactions far more efficiently than corrections. You've probably noticed this yourself. A shocking claim spreads faster than its debunking ever can. Emotion fuels engagement, clicks, and shares, while factual clarifications often remain buried. What's even more striking is how quickly people adapt the narrative to fit their expectations. Some began to say, the palace is downplaying it. Others insisted, they're trying to protect him. This is a classic feature of rumor dynamics. The story evolves to survive scrutiny. Specific claims, like car crash, became more vague, incident or situation, allowing the narrative to persist no matter what checks are made. And the audience didn't just consume, they participated. Every comment, every reaction, every share reinforced the story's emotional momentum. Even skepticism, ironically, contributed to the spread. I don't believe this, but here's what I'm seeing is as viral as outright panic because it engages others emotionally and invites debate. By this point, the story had escaped its origin. It was no longer tied to a single post. It was a social phenomenon. Layers of interpretation, opinion, and fear stacked upon each other. Every new viewer encountered not just a claim, but a tapestry of emotional context. Outrage, grief, panic, and speculation. Here's where it gets deeper. Prince Harry's personal history amplified the effect. His public narrative, marked by tragedy, challenges with the press, and past encounters with danger, primes audiences to believe that he could be at risk. Rumors that might seem absurd about others feel plausible when associated with someone whose life has historically been turbulent. It's a phenomenon called narrative priming. Previous context makes new claims feel inevitable. So, the combination of silence, the word confirmed, and an emotionally charged figure created a perfect storm. And it wasn't just about clicks. It was about real emotional consequences. Viewers experienced stress, fear, and even grief, all triggered by an unverified rumor. But the plot thickened. As the story reached mainstream awareness, journalists began reporting cautiously, emphasizing the lack of official confirmation. And this created a fascinating social reaction. People resisted correction. They'd already anchored their emotional response to the rumor. Cognitive bias made them reluctant to accept the truth, even when presented clearly. Some went further, claiming that denial itself was a cover-up. "Of course they're denying it," said one viral commentator. "If it were real, they'd manage the message." Denial is part of the strategy. This is a critical insight into how modern misinformation survives. It adapts to scrutiny. No matter what evidence is presented, the story morphs to persist. At the same time, small social media accounts continued to feed the panic. Reaction videos, speculation streams, and commentary podcasts created emotional narratives around silence. Viewers weren't just consuming information. They were consuming fear, suspense, and drama. Every clip, every post reinforced the story. Emotional reinforcement became stronger than factual reinforcement. Now consider this. If silence can be interpreted as proof, then every delayed response, every missing press statement, every ambiguous message becomes a potential tool for narrative manipulation. The audience itself, through anxiety and speculation, contributes to the perceived reality. But then, a critical moment arrived. For the first time, credible sources began providing clarity. Journalists and media analysts released detailed timelines and fact checks. They confirmed there was no incident, no crash, and no official statement had been made. Yet the impact of silence lingered. Emotional reactions had already cascaded through millions of people. Social media had amplified fear faster than correction could follow. And even after the truth was known, remnants of panic persisted. Some doubted the fact checks. Others remembered the fear more vividly than the clarification. This is the paradox of digital misinformation. Once emotion is anchored, it rarely disappears entirely, even when the facts are corrected. That is why silence can be as powerful as words, and in some cases, even more so. But here's the real twist. The story didn't just expose how quickly people believe headlines. It revealed how the structure of social media and human psychology interact to turn rumor into perceived reality. Timing, phrasing, emotional resonance, and silence all work together to create a narrative almost impossible to dislodge. And as the world absorbed this lesson, a question emerged. If a single headline about a high-profile figure can generate panic without any evidence, what does this mean for the countless other stories circulating every day? How often does fear outrun truth? And what are the consequences for our perception of reality? But just when it seemed the rumor might fade entirely, something unexpected happened. Small pockets of speculation evolved into a new layer of narrative. Debates about why the palace hadn't spoken sooner, claims about hidden incidents, and even suggestions of conspiracy. The rumor had transformed. It was no longer about whether something happened. It was about the perception of secrecy, the fear of omission, and the emotional tension surrounding one of the most visible figures in modern history. Not the verified ones, not the official spokespeople, but the whisperers, the so-called palace sources who suddenly appeared across social media and in commentary videos. Anonymous, unnamed, and impossible to verify, they claimed to know more. Every claim carried just enough detail to feel credible. Every snippet added tension, and every post was copied, shared, and amplified at lightning speed. One said, "He's being monitored closely. This is serious." Another, "Medical teams were on standby, but details are confidential." Yet another, "The royal family is coordinating a statement, but you won't see it until later." Notice a pattern? None of them confirmed a crash. None provided verifiable proof. And yet, they were cited as authorities. Each statement fed the emotional storm. Panic didn't come from fact. It came from perceived insider knowledge. This is a classic feature of rumor dynamics. A small number of insiders create the illusion of a network of truth. People assume someone with connections knows more. And because the information seems hard to access, belief strengthens. Meanwhile, the story had grown beyond social media. Late-night commentators, reaction podcasts, and even some mainstream news outlets began referencing the anonymous insiders, sometimes with the caveat that the information was unverified. But the caveat mattered little. The emotional weight of the claim carried the story. Now, let's step back and analyze why this tactic is so effective. Humans are wired to trust those who seem to have access to privileged information. We crave exclusivity, a sense that we're in the know before the rest of the world. And when that privilege aligns with fear, a potential threat to someone we care about, critical thinking is overridden by emotion. By the time multiple insider claims circulated, the rumor had achieved an unstoppable momentum. Each post was cited as confirmation of the previous one. Repetition plus perceived authority equals belief. Social proof did the rest. Every user who read multiple posts assumed multiple sources were confirming the event, even though, in reality, they were all drawing from the same speculative well. And while panic escalated online, the royal family remained quiet. Official channels had nothing to release because nothing had occurred. But silence, once again, became a tool. People interpreted it in the context of the fear that had already been established. If they haven't denied it, it must be true. This is a cognitive shortcut known as motivated reasoning. People accept information that aligns with their expectations and emotional state. As speculation intensified, new narratives emerged. Some claimed that Prince Harry's previous experiences with danger made him vulnerable to a real accident. Others tied the rumor to political motives, suggesting that leaks were orchestrated to distract from other royal events. Every new narrative added complexity, layered tension, and emotional investment. The story became multidimensional. It was no longer a simple "did something happen or not?" It was about secrecy, legacy, vulnerability, and fear. This is also where emotional beats became critical. Viewers weren't just consuming information, they were consuming drama. Posts about the rumor included photos of Prince Harry, family images, and even footage from previous incidents, intentionally or unintentionally evoking memory and emotion. Emotional resonance made the story feel personal. People weren't just watching, they were living it. By now, platforms were fully engaged. Algorithms detected high engagement and promoted content aggressively. Videos with higher emotional reactions appeared in more feeds. Threads with more replies and arguments gained visibility. Every response fueled further spread. The rumor had evolved into a self-sustaining ecosystem of attention. Then came the contradictions. Some insiders suggested the situation was minor. Others claimed it was catastrophic. Some said medical teams had intervened. Others said nothing had happened at all. And yet, the contradictions didn't reduce belief, they enhanced it. Cognitive dissonance doesn't always diminish conviction. Sometimes, it intensifies engagement. People argue, debate, and defend their interpretation, further embedding the narrative into social consciousness. At this point, traditional media had to respond carefully. Fact-checking became a delicate process. Journalists couldn't just issue a blunt denial. The rumor had become intertwined with real fears. Statements had to be carefully worded to address panic without trivializing emotional responses. Even as corrections were issued, the emotional impact of the rumor persisted. Many people remembered their fear and concern more vividly than the clarification. This chapter also illustrates how rumors exploit uncertainty. Ambiguity in language. Terms like incident versus car crash allowed multiple interpretations to coexist. Some believed the worst. Others hoped for the best. But the emotional tension remained constant. Ambiguity fuels imagination, and imagination fuels engagement. By now, the rumor had become a mirror reflecting collective anxieties, fear of loss, distrust of institutions, and fascination with privilege. Prince Harry's public persona, his vulnerability, history of tragedy, and high visibility made him the perfect focal point. This was no longer just a story about one headline. It was a story about how humans react to uncertainty, authority, and emotion in the digital age. And then, just when it seemed the narrative couldn't become more complex, a new factor entered. Influencers who specialized in reaction content. These creators thrived on suspense. They recapped rumors, speculated about insider claims, and dramatized every silence. Their commentary wasn't about verification, it was about performance. And audiences consumed it eagerly. Emotional amplification reached new heights. The rumor had evolved into a performance art of panic. It didn't matter whether the information was accurate. What mattered was the tension it created, the emotions it triggered, and the way it engaged viewers. Fear itself had become the product. But here's the most crucial twist. The rumor's longevity depended on its adaptability. By allowing contradictions, ambiguity, and silence to coexist, the narrative could survive scrutiny, fact checks, and clarifications. The story became resilient because it wasn't tied to a single fact, it was tied to emotion. And emotion doesn't need evidence to survive. At this point, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between perception and reality. The rumor had reached a tipping point. Millions had reacted, shared, and internalized the story emotionally. But now the truth was starting to filter in. Journalists and credible sources began issuing detailed clarifications, timelines, and verifications. They confirmed that no crash occurred. The royal family had not issued any statement. And here's where the cliffhanger emerges. Despite the truth, the narrative refused to collapse. Some users ignored the fact checks. Others incorporated them into the story, claiming the denial itself was part of a cover-up. The rumor mutated again. It survived scrutiny by transforming. Emotion had become stronger than fact, and belief had become self-sustaining. What people often forget is that rumors don't exist in a vacuum. They land on minds already primed for fear, anxiety, or unresolved grief. And in the case of Prince Harry, that priming was particularly potent. His life story, publicly documented over decades, is steeped in trauma, vulnerability, and exposure. From the loss of his mother at a young age to the relentless scrutiny by the media, the public has come to associate his life with tension, danger, and tragedy. So when the initial rumor surfaced, it didn't feel out of place. It fit seamlessly into an existing narrative, one that millions already carried in their minds. That's why emotion overtook logic so quickly. Fear wasn't just a response. It was a continuation of a story people had already been telling themselves for years. This chapter isn't about the rumor itself. It's about context. The emotional context that makes a seemingly implausible claim feel inevitable. Cognitive psychologists call this affective forecasting. Our brains predict how events will make us feel, and we respond emotionally before checking facts. In other words, the audience had already imagined the worst before reality had even been established. Consider the moment social media feeds lit up. Viewers weren't just scrolling. They were reliving memories and fears connected to Prince Harry. Every post, comment, and share carried echoes of the past. Images of his mother, footage from previous incidents, news clips about past scandals, all resurfaced in conjunction with the rumor, amplifying the emotional resonance. And emotion is contagious. Neurologists have shown that observing someone else's emotional state can trigger the same neural pathways in our own brains. In practical terms, seeing influencers or commentators express panic, sorrow, or outrage creates a mirrored reaction in the audience. Fear spreads as efficiently as any virus, often faster than factual updates can arrive. At the same time, the rumor was evolving. The word crash began to be replaced by incident or situation, a subtle shift that increased ambiguity. Why? Because specificity can be disproven. Ambiguity, however, survives scrutiny. It allows multiple interpretations to coexist, each validated by different emotional lenses. This is a hallmark of resilient misinformation. It adapts to survive. Meanwhile, the audience itself became part of the narrative engine. Some commented, "I hope he's okay," while others speculated wildly. This must be a cover-up. Even dissenting voices, those asking for evidence, contributed by drawing more attention to the story. Engagement, whether agreement or skepticism, fuels visibility. Every reaction, every discussion, strengthens the perception of reality, regardless of actual facts. The royal family's silence, as we explored in the previous chapter, was interpreted as proof. People reasoned, if nothing happened, wouldn't they have spoken immediately? This is a classic example of motivated reasoning. Our brains accept information that aligns with our fears or expectations and discount anything that contradicts it. Silence becomes evidence because it fits a pre-existing narrative. Let's examine the role of content creators in this stage. Influencers, commentators, and reaction channels thrived on uncertainty. They didn't need confirmation, they needed drama. By framing speculation as suspenseful reporting, they created layers of emotional tension that hooked audiences. Each livestream, each video, each thread added new dimensions to the narrative. Imagine consequences, hypothetical interventions, and potential family reactions. And the algorithms amplified it all. Platforms favor engagement, and nothing engages like fear. Videos with shocked faces, urgent tones, and speculative commentary reached millions. Threads with debates and arguments generated more replies, which increased visibility further. The more the story was interacted with, the more prominent it became. The system itself rewarded the rumor, regardless of its factual accuracy. By now, we can see a pattern. The rumor had grown into a self-perpetuating ecosystem. Emotional reaction drove visibility. Visibility drove more emotional reaction. And the cycle reinforced itself endlessly. The initial post was no longer relevant. The story existed independently, powered by engagement, fear, and psychological priming. Here's a critical insight. This is not just about Prince Harry. This is a case study in how humans respond to uncertainty, authority, and emotion in the digital age. Timing, language, emotion, and silence combined to create a narrative that could survive scrutiny, resist correction, and continue to affect millions. And then came the contradictions. Some claimed minor concern, others predicted catastrophic outcomes. Some whispered about medical interventions, others insisted nothing had occurred. These contradictions didn't weaken belief, they strengthened engagement. Cognitive dissonance doesn't always resolve by abandoning the narrative. Often, it results in deeper immersion. People argued, debated, and defended their interpretations, solidifying emotional investment. Amid all this, journalists worked quietly to fact-check. They traced timelines, reached out to sources, and confirmed that no car crash had occurred. The royal family had not issued a statement because no incident had happened. But by now, the emotional imprint of the rumor had already taken root. Fact checks can correct knowledge, but they rarely erase the physiological response, the stress, the anxiety, the fear that the rumor triggered. And this is where it becomes clear. Silence, ambiguity, emotional resonance, and perceived authority are more powerful than words. The narrative had become resilient because it wasn't tied to facts, it was tied to emotion. Once emotion dominates, facts are secondary. But the story wasn't over. The rumor evolved again, mutating to survive scrutiny. Denials were reframed as cover-ups. Silence was interpreted as control. Ambiguity allowed multiple interpretations to coexist, keeping the narrative alive in social consciousness. Emotional impact outpaced factual clarity, and belief became self-sustaining. This chapter illustrates a fundamental truth. Perception can outrun reality. Fear can travel faster than truth. Silence can be louder than statements. And emotion can override evidence, creating a self-perpetuating cycle that reshapes how we interpret events in real time. By now, millions of people weren't just reading about a possible car crash, they were feeling it. The emotional impact had reached beyond social media feeds into living rooms, workplaces, and family conversations. Anxiety levels spiked for those who had long followed Prince Harry's life. Panic, stress, and anticipation became tangible. Some viewers reported heart palpitations. Others described a sinking feeling reminiscent of bad news they'd experienced before. This is not an exaggeration. Studies in neuropsychology show that when we witness emotionally charged events, especially involving individuals we've formed parasocial relationships with, our brains react as though we are personally involved. Mirror neurons fire. Cortisol levels rise. Fear becomes a physiological state, not just a mental one. And in this scenario, the rumor acted as a trigger. A single headline, amplified by emotional content and social reinforcement, activated real stress responses. Meanwhile, the rumor ecosystem continued evolving. As commentators speculated on the incident, the story branched into sub-narratives. Debates about the royal family's response strategy, analyses of Prince Harry's recent movements, theories about media manipulation, and imagined timelines of what could have happened. Each sub-narrative created fresh engagement loops. Users who were emotionally invested consumed not just the rumor, but the meta-story of speculation itself. This is where the concept of rumor scaffolding comes in. The initial unverified claim acts as the foundation. Emotional response and social reinforcement build the framework. Repetition, perceived insider claims, and ambiguity act as supports. Once complete, the rumor structure can sustain itself even when some elements, like the initial claim, are debunked. The architecture of belief has become stronger than its factual basis. Simultaneously, the royal family's historical public perception influenced reactions. Prince Harry is not just a celebrity. He's a figure whose life has been marked by vulnerability in the public eye. Past events, his mother's tragic death, high-profile controversies, and ongoing media scrutiny prime audiences to believe that danger is a constant presence in his life. The rumor exploited this pre-existing narrative, seamlessly integrating with the collective mental model of his story. As the hours progressed, the rumor spread internationally. News outlets in different countries referenced social media reactions, often with disclaimers, but the emotional energy carried across borders. In many cases, translation errors or cultural reinterpretations intensified the sense of urgency. What began as a localized panic transformed into a global phenomenon. At the same time, social media users began to exhibit behavioral responses consistent with heightened stress. Some posted immediate messages of concern to friends and family. Others engaged in speculative debates in comment sections. A few even altered their routines, checking multiple news sources, following live feeds obsessively, or seeking constant updates. Emotional engagement became a form of participation, reinforcing both the perceived reality of the incident and the social dynamics sustaining it. Then came the next complication: institutional silence. While platforms struggled with misinformation policies, the royal family and official spokespersons remained measured, releasing no immediate statement because there was nothing to report. Yet silence, as we've seen, is a double-edged sword. It allowed rumor advocates to claim secrecy, cover-up, or intentional delay. Silence became a narrative tool. Absence of evidence was now interpreted as evidence itself. Content creators escalated. Reaction live streams, commentary videos, and speculative threads reached new heights. Some offered hypothetical scenarios of what could have happened, complete with dramatic music and editing techniques designed to maximize suspense. Others cited anonymous, palace sources or purported eyewitness accounts. Each new layer, real or imagined, added complexity to the story and deepened emotional investment. At the same time, contradictions emerged. But instead of weakening belief, they strengthened it. Some claimed minor incidents, others claimed catastrophic ones. Some insisted the palace was hiding details, others suggested this was a media distraction. This coexistence of multiple, conflicting narratives is characteristic of resilient rumors. Ambiguity allows the story to survive scrutiny, adapt to criticism, and persist in the collective consciousness. Then came the critical insight. The rumor ecosystem wasn't just consuming attention. It was shaping perception. Users weren't passive recipients. They were active participants. Every comment, share, debate, and reaction functioned as reinforcement. Emotional engagement had become the currency of validation, making the story resilient to factual correction. Once the audience's physiological and psychological responses were triggered, logic became secondary. Journalists continued to work quietly, issuing fact checks and clarifications. They confirmed timelines, flight records, and public appearances. They verified that no crash had occurred and that no statement had been issued. But even with the truth out, the rumor's emotional imprint remained. Many viewers remembered the panic more vividly than the correction. Anxiety, fear, and tension persisted. The rumor had crossed the threshold from information to experience. And then, a critical mutation occurred. The narrative adapted to survive the truth. Denials were reframed as evidence of cover-up. Ambiguity persisted. Emotional resonance dominated over factual clarity. The story had entered a self-sustaining loop. Belief fueled content creation reinforced belief, and emotional investment entrenched both. This chapter highlights a crucial lesson. Perception can outrun reality, and emotion can overpower facts. The rumor had become not just a story about Prince Harry, but a reflection of human cognitive biases, social dynamics, and the mechanics of modern digital media. Fear had traveled faster than truth, and silence had amplified its power. And here's the cliffhanger. If a single headline can generate such widespread panic, mutate through social amplification, and persist even after being debunked, what does that say about the information landscape we live in? What stories are shaping our reality without us even realizing it? Then came the turning point, the convergence of fact and perception. Up to this moment, the rumor had existed largely in a space of speculation. Social media feeds were flooded with panic, commentary, and imagined scenarios. Yet official channels, journalists, verified media outlets, and fact-checkers were beginning to compile evidence. Timelines were reconstructed. Public appearances were reviewed. No car crash had occurred. No hospital visits were reported. The royal family had not released any statement because there was nothing to report. And yet, the rumor did not simply vanish. Its survival was a lesson in human psychology. By now, the audience had invested emotionally. They had imagined the worst. Their physiological responses had already engaged. Stress hormones were released, hearts raced, and tension built. Once emotion is engaged, facts alone rarely dislodge it. Belief had become more about feeling than about evidence. This is a critical insight. Emotional investment creates a kind of cognitive inertia. Even when evidence contradicts the rumor, the brain resists updating because the cost of emotional recalibration is high. People do not simply unfeel panic or grief. Instead, they reinterpret facts to fit the emotional reality they have already experienced. Meanwhile, the rumor ecosystem had evolved further. Influencers, reaction channels, and commentary pages were now framing the clarifications themselves as suspicious. Some suggested, of course they're denying it. That's part of the strategy. Others reframed corrections as partial truths, emphasizing uncertainty over resolution. In doing so, the narrative mutated. It no longer relied on the original headline. It survived on doubt, ambiguity, and emotional resonance. At the same time, audience participation continued to fuel the cycle. Comments, shares, debates, and even skeptical posts kept engagement high. The more people interacted, the more the story propagated. The rumor had transcended its origin. It was now a social phenomenon sustained by collective emotional investment. This moment also highlighted the mechanics of digital media ecosystems. Algorithms do not prioritize truth, they prioritize engagement. Emotional reactions drive clicks, comments, and shares, which in turn increases visibility. Fear, suspense, and drama are amplified because they generate the highest engagement. The system itself rewarded the rumor, irrespective of accuracy. Now, consider the role of ambiguity. Initially, the claim was specific, a car crash. As scrutiny increased, language shifted. The term incident emerged, followed by situation or event. Ambiguity allowed multiple interpretations to coexist. Some feared the worst. Others hoped for the best. Yet both emotional responses reinforced engagement. Ambiguity is a survival mechanism for rumors. It allows adaptation without needing verification. At the same time, the social psychology of crowds amplified the story. Observing mass panic increases individual anxiety. Mirror neurons engage. Emotional contagion spreads. Each new post, comment, or video not only reinforced belief, but also spread physiological responses. Panic became shared experience. Fear was collective. Journalists and credible sources continued to clarify. They issued timelines, referenced verifiable records, and explicitly stated that no crash had occurred. The royal family's official channels remained silent, not because of concealment, but because there was no event to address. Yet even with these clarifications, many users remained skeptical. Denials were reframed, silence was interpreted as secrecy, and the emotional imprint of the rumor persisted. This phase illustrates a key truth. Once perception outruns reality, reversing it is exponentially difficult. Belief is no longer contingent on facts. It is reinforced by social proof, emotional resonance, and cognitive bias. The rumor had entered a self-sustaining loop. Fear fueled engagement. Engagement amplified visibility. Visibility strengthened belief. But here's the deeper layer. The audience's trust in authority had already been subtly undermined. The very act of silence, combined with the perceived authority of insider sources, created an environment where speculation felt more credible than official statements. People relied more on their emotions and social cues than on verifiable evidence. The rumor had reshaped the dynamics of credibility. At this juncture, the story shifted from being about a hypothetical incident to being about information itself. It became a reflection of how humans process uncertainty, risk, and authority in a hyper-connected, hyper-emotional digital environment. Every post, every comment, every reaction became both symptom and amplifier. Then came the critical observation. Even after verification, the emotional consequences persisted. Anxiety, tension, and fear remained. Some viewers internalized the scenario as if it had actually occurred. Physiological responses did not disappear simply because facts corrected the record. In this way, the rumor had lasting impact, independent of its truth. Then came the amplification phase, the point where the rumor became bigger than any single platform, bigger than any single post, and almost